Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be reviewing the T248 wheel and pedal kit from Thrustmaster with a claimed 70% more power than the T150 wheelbase and a new contactless position sensor setup for the pedals. Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. Let's take a closer look at this T248 wheel setup from Thrustmaster. First, out of the box, it feels pretty light. Comes in at 4 pounds, 14.5 ounces, and that's 2.23 kilos for everybody else in the world. So not a lot of heft to this wheel. Considering it comes with a steering wheel and a motor section here, I thought it would be just a little bit heavier than that, but kind of can be very deceiving as far as what kind of power it can put out. The power rating, by the way, while we're talking about it, is supposed to be 70% more than their T150 steering wheel. So, yeah. Of course, they say it's 70% more power. They don't say it's 70% more torque, which are two different things. So, we'll see about that as we advance through the review. Just injection molded plastic everywhere. Again, this is totally what I expect at this kind of price point for a force feedback wheelbase with a steering wheel and a set of pedals at $400. It's just very plasticky in general. The steering wheel itself actually has a pretty good mold to it as far as the grip goes. It fits the hand pretty well. And again, it's very hard plastic here. And on the top, they have put a section of, they say this is leather on the outside here, which it could be. It smells maybe a little bit like leather, but I don't know. I guess it is, if they say it is. But anyway, the thing it does, though, because it's soft up here and it's so hard on the inside where you're gripping it with your thumb, there's definitely a contrast of feel between this and this, which you notice. And the seam caused by the joint here where the leather is connecting to the hard plastic part is also gives you that contrasting feel because it feels a little bit wider than the actual plastic rim itself when you grab it. Yeah, obviously, this is not going to really affect how you drive. It's just things that I like to point out that I discover on the wheel when I'm showing you these things. The wheel also has a pretty cool little LCD display here where we can see our gear changes, we can see RPM, different things you can put on this screen as you're running the wheel, depending on what you want to see. And we can also tune the wheel, force feedback, and the other pieces of that force feedback as far as like torque settings and how much friction you have, things like that. Of course, they might call it something else in their menus, but you can set all this up in different profiles, a la the Fanatec type system, if you will, that where you can go in and set things up on their little screen. This is a pretty decent little screen. We'll see that later on as we go through the review, all the functionality in there. It's nice that they've actually included it at this price point, I think. Believe it or not, it actually worked without any problems for me when I was running it. Right out of the box, just plugged it in, loaded the drivers, and it worked. I didn't have to keep reloading the drivers and turning it on and turning it off. It actually worked. So kudos for that to Thrustmaster. Now, the button setup, again, this is a PlayStation compatible wheel, PlayStation 4, 5. So obviously it's going to have the PlayStation reset buttons and the squares, the X's, the circles, the triangle. And of course we have our D-pad buttons over here and our L2s, R2s, R3s, L3s, the usual stuff. Now these buttons don't feel like anything special. They're just buttons. And they feel obviously very plasticky underhand, under your finger here. Of course, a glove, it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't know what they felt like. You don't get a lot of tactile feedback from them, is my point. The D-pad's a little bit better as far as tactile feedback, and so are these buttons here in the PlayStation. Maybe it's because these are square the way they're made. You do get some tactile feedback from these guys, though. These actually have a pretty little click to them when you're clicking them, and they don't move very far when you click them, though. See how far that moves when I click it. You can hear that. They don't move very much. But you can use these buttons for navigating through your menu and things like that. Again, we'll check out that a little bit closer once we get there. The face, you know, it has some fascia accents here that match the little piece that's going around the wheelbase itself. See it there? So it all matches up. It reminds me of a regular type of car steering wheel and maybe more of a high performance type smaller car because of these accents they have on them nowadays when they come out of the dealership. This is just looks like a thin piece of metal that's red for the top part, your center indicator. What else can we see here? One big surprise here, and here it is. Listen to this. How about that? Now that is a nice tactile feeling paddle shifter, but it's also a loud paddle shifter, which has took me by surprise, I have to admit. Most of these wheels, Logitech, the Thrustmasters, even my TSPC Racer, the shifter on the Ferrari wheel from them feels kind of mushy compared to this. This is crisp, and it has a nice tactile feel to it, but it's loud, and that surprises me because, you know, when you're marketing these type of wheels and you're building these products, you have to realize that, you know, somebody that buys this wheel is kind of an entry-level wheel, right? And you're going to be using it on Xboxes, PlayStations, PCs, but chances are you'll be using it in the living room, and maybe somebody's trying to do something else in the next room, in the house or the apartment or in the closet that you're racing in, whatever the case may be. And they're going to hear this. No doubt about it. So I'm just surprised that this wheel comes with these shifters. This has got to be probably one of the best things about the wheel to me. When I was driving it, I really liked the tactile feedback I was getting from these. And again, it's still a plastic paddle on here, and it's, you know, just plastic, but still, it's got a nice tactile click to it. And it's got a little rubber damping in it. You might think it didn't, but it does. You can see these little pieces of rubber in here, so I can point them out here. There's one right up in, where'd it go? There it is. Down in there. Little piece of rubber that's hitting this little rib sticking out here. It's got a twin rib set up. And of course, it's the same thing on the bottom. Now, it's not as loud when you pull it in. And it might not be able to tell from the audio on this video, but it's louder when you let it go because internally, it doesn't sound like they have the same rubber stuff, even though it's still very loud when you press it. You could probably put some bigger pads in there to quiet that down if you really had a problem with it. Of course, where I race, it doesn't matter. The louder, the better to me, as long as it's a crisp tactile feel to it. And when actually using this and driving it, never missed a shift. It just, you know, I come down from like fifth to first and just like that, bam, it's there. So I'm impressed by the shifters. But the other stuff is usual, you know, the run-of-the-mill stuff here as far as the buttons go. But the shifters almost seem out of sorts because they feel so good compared to everything else on the wheel. Right, what else can we talk about here on this wheel? This is a detachable wheel. I don't think it's made to put another rim on it, but there are ways to get it off. And we're going to do a look inside, so we'll discover that more as we go along. You see there's a Phillips head screw right in there that's holding this wheel to the shaft there. We turn it 180 degrees, and there's one on the bottom. So I'll be taking those off, I'm sure, to be able to get this wheel to disconnect when we do our look inside. The main casing back here. All right, so we've got some perforations on the top. We have some on the bottom right here. And I don't know if there's a fan in here or not. I'd never heard of the fan when I was running it, but it could be just a convection where the cool air is coming in the bottom, the hot air is coming out the top. And while we're on the bottom, we can see there's our desktop clamp hole with the M10 bolt threads in there. We also have two M6 bolt holes right here on the back. So you can mount it, and that's how I mounted this when I was running it. Got some rubber feet, and we have the usual Thrustmaster back here, except there is one thing different back here on the connectors. You can see that we have the usual RJ12 over here, and that's for the pedals. Then next to it, we had the PS2 type interface, and that would be for your shifter. And we have a USB-C connector. So we're finally coming into an updated position here with the USB, where it's not a USB-B type interface. And of course, we have our DC power supply over there. We also have some cable routing slots in here. So we can route our cables nice and neatly when we plug them all in here. We got a piece of Velcro strapping that we can put around our cables when we have it mounted. And yeah, that's about it. Usual rubber pieces again that went up here too. Let's look at the back. We have on that. Of course, it tells us the model name, which is a T248 PS for PlayStation. It also tells us the power is 18.5 volts DC at 2.59 amps. I think I would just round that off to 2.6, but there you go. And made in China, of course. We got 3 screws back here. I'm guessing it's holding some of the metal framing that's probably inside this, holding the motor and some other bits. Like I said, once we do a look inside, we'll see how all that's working out. Looks like it's going to be pretty easy to get in as far as I can tell. Of course, I've been fooled before when it comes to that. What else can we talk about on this wheel? We already talked about 70% more power. Well, they didn't say torque though. The magnetic paddle shifters, we talked about those. Again, I like these paddles. Yeah, these feel like they're should be on a different wheel. The buttons on here, they say there's 25, but I only counted 23 physical buttons, including our shifters back here. I'm not sure what they mean by 25. Maybe there's somewhere one of these buttons doubles up as something else. But I was actually counting how many different moves we have, and I came up with 23. Maybe I can't count. The force back, they have 3 different types of force feedback. They're calling this force feedback, which is 100%. They have enhanced force feedback for better skid control. We'll be checking that stuff out, though. While I'm driving it, I'll be checking that out and seeing if it really makes a difference. I know a lot of this stuff is just, it's something to set differently, just to have something to set differently. But again, we'll figure all that out once we get there. Now, of course, it comes with the usual desk mount from Thrustmaster, rubber pads on the swivels, so it'll level out for you when you have it on your desk. They have this clamp system that goes in a slot like this, and there's our M10 bolt. And as you turn around this way, as we clamp this down, it will, you can see it kind of moves the bolt down, which is actually moving the piece up here so it clamps down instead of just a wheel to turn or something like that, or a bar. I kind of like the lever system, and all of this is injection molded plastic, of course. We've got the little radius part in there that matches the radius of our ball on here. So yeah, pretty standard fare here for Thrustmaster. The power supply we get is a switching power supply, Zen power supply, and it has, again, tells us the output is matching what we have on the back of the wheel at 18.5 volts at 2.59 amps. And yeah, just switching power supply. Got our DC connector over here, no ferrite cores in the wiring. And we have our cord over here that has the plug that will fit in that power supply, and a regular 115 volt North American type power plug on that side. What else do we have? I guess that's about it. Doesn't come with much, but you don't need much, I suppose. You just bolt this thing up and off you go once you get everything wired up. So yeah, overall, this is meeting my expectations. The only thing it's not is this shifter. And the rest of it, and of course the display works pretty good too, but we'll see that when we get to that segment. So other than that, yeah, it's just the standard fare that we would expect at this price point for this kind of force feedback wheel setup or kit that includes all this stuff. So we'll just go ahead and get to the next segment. Now let's take a closer look at the Thrustmaster pedal set that comes with your kit when you get a T248 wheelbase. First off, it's the usual Thrustmaster type shape and pattern here. It has the big heel rest area. This is all injection molded plastic. And we have some steel faces here on the pedals themselves. The arms are again injection molded plastic with the reinforced sections in here. We have a spring and elastomer set up for our brake pedal back here. Now this is not a load cell brake pedal. This is a magnetic sensing. All these pedals are, as far as it's like a Hall effect sensor on all the pedals instead of potentiometers, which is very good as far as coming into the modern century here, getting away from these potentiometers on brake pedals. The cheaper ones they had on here would accumulate dust from your socks and stuff like that, and just you had to keep cleaning them out. The Hall sensor won't do that, or at least not as much. You might still have to get in there and blow some dust off, but it won't be as hard as it is with potentiometers. But it's all about position sensing here. So again, if we had a load cell, it would be a pressure-based system, but this is all about positional sensing with your foot. I did have a hard time using these. It did take me a while to get accustomed to the positional feel of the brake pedal, even though I did put the harder spring in. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's just one of those things where if you're used to a load cell pedal, it's not easy to transition over to a position sensor type pedal. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it again, but I was able to come up to speed quickly enough, I suppose. So let's talk about the bottom here. Again, another piece of injection molded plastic with no less than 19 screws going across this thing to secure it to the top half of the shelf. On the bottom, we see the information that we usually see on these kind of things. Right there. And we can see it's a T3PM model number. We have the cable over here that has the RJ12, the proprietary RJ12, where they have the little clip sitting off center there. Typical Thrustmaster connector. Again, we have steel pedal faces. I think I'm going to go ahead and show you the adjustments because there's really nothing else to see here as far as the pedal set goes. And we're going to go over some of the adjustments. First, we'll look at the faces that come on here and the wedges behind them. I'll just go ahead and do the clutch. Now, these things are not easy to get out. So we're going to put a little power behind it. And I'll just bear with me while I get these off. So we have some machine screws in here. They're about 20 millimeters long, 25 maybe, flathead units. So they fit into the countersunk area on the pedals themselves. They actually got some heft to them. This is a stiff pedal. I don't have any problems with the pedal as far as quality goes. Now, as far as adjustments, and you can see back here, we've got these metal inserts in the pedal arm itself. So they kind of press these in so that we have metal to screw to, which is nicer than just having plastic that you screw in those wood screw type of screws that are made for plastic. Good to see that, but boy, I gotta say, these things were stiff coming out of there. I'm not sure why, because it's a machine thread in there. Anyway, we have this wedge in here, and from the factory it comes in this position. So the skinny part's on the top. So that's more of a laid back position for the pedal face. You can flip this around, and then it's going to kick the pedal face forward a little bit. Not a lot, but just as much as it from here to here. It's not a whole lot, but it will kick the pedal forward a little bit. And I might use it that way. I'm not sure yet. We have 4 sets of holes here, or rather 4 holes, 2 sets, and that allows you to adjust the height. So you got either up or down. From the factory default, it's at the highest position, which would be the bottom 2 holes. We could actually lower this down if you wanted to with the top 2 holes on these pairs. Simple enough. And other than that, yeah, that's all we have there as far as these screws go. And like I said, I had this ready because I knew it was going to be tough getting them out. Just be prepared for that. Now, let's talk about the other adjustment we have. Now, Thrustmaster says we've got 4 different ways to adjust this. And I'll show you a little clip, or shot rather, from their user manual. It goes soft, medium, hard, very hard. And basically, soft would be taking this elastomer out and just running the spring. And then the second one would be medium with the elastomer in and the silver spring, which is the lighter spring. We also have the black spring over here, which we can run by itself also, or we run it with the cushioning, and that would be the very hard. This is how I'm going to run my pedal set. And you'll see that when I'm actually using it in the videos when I'm driving. Just a little bit light for me. And I like a lot of pedal pressure. Well, not a ton of it, obviously, but so again, this is something that's very subjective at the end of the day also. So it depends on what you like. But out of the box, for somebody who's just doing their socks, this might be a bit stiff for them. So you can take that elastomer out and make it softer. Now, it's very easy to change this stuff. Well, it's sort of easy as far as the process is concerned. But yeah, you got to be careful what you're doing here. Now, in the instructions, I'm going to put my gloves on here because they're grippier than my fingers are. According to the instructions, you're supposed to be able to get in here and put your fingers under this red piece here. I'll get you a little look at what's going on here. So you got this red retainer here. We got a red one up here, and they're both shaped the same. And we have obviously our bumper up there, and we have a top part. So all this is separate little pieces here. So the idea is to pull this up, and there's this socket sitting down in the plastic enough to get it out. But I tell you, it's not easy on your fingers, and even with gloves on, it's not that easy. So it's better to take something that helps. Now, you could put that'll help you get it out. You could put a screwdriver in here, but that's going to mar things up. I like to use these things. These are like tools that you use inside for car interior disassembly, where you get up behind the cards on the side of the doors and pry them off and stuff, and it won't mar anything. You can see they're kind of dirty and chewed up. I use these things a lot. So what I'm going to do is get under here. There's a little space in here, little slot, if you will, or space in between where there's 2 pieces. See that? I'm going to get in between the center there and pry up on it and slide it out and try to keep it from flying out. why I'm doing this. So I'll just go ahead and get in here and see, I'll do it this way so you guys can see what I'm doing a little better. Like this. And then I'm just going to pop it up. You can hear it pop there. And I'm going to put my finger down further down here to try to keep this thing from kicking up too far and going flying out. That's anyway how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to just kind of slide it up there. And you can see I can kind of guide it out and keep control of it. That's the main thing. So now this whole piece comes out. All this comes out like this. So let's go ahead and lay it down here. See what it is. This is our top piece that's fitting into obviously a little slot that's inside of our pedal lever. And that stays the same. That never changes. So it's always going to be in part of your stack, obviously, or it would fly around. This is the bumper, the elastomer bumper here. It feels pretty firm. I'm not sure what the durometer is on this, but what I did discover is if you've ever had a Fanatec set, I've got some old bumpers from an old Fanatec piece that I had, and it actually fits on here. So you could actually try different bumpers. So that's the cool thing about having bumpers anyway, in general. And Fibroflex makes some I'm sure would fit in here. I've got some of those too. All right, so this piece here, that's the retainer washer piece, if you will. And we have one on the bottom here too. Here's the silver spring, comes right off. We have this one on the bottom. Here you can see these are identical. The reds might be causing a problem seeing them, but they're identical, made to retain the springs. And the bumper piece is on the top part that way. So these guys are always kind of facing each other. And we have the bottom bar assembly right here. It's like a little T-wrench. And again, it's fitting down in the socket that we just pried it out of down in here. Good angle of it there. So when you want to rebuild it to change your adjustments, we could go the softest, which would be just putting the spring back in without this guy in there. Or we could do it like it was, and that's what they call the medium. Or we could just come back in with our black spring, which is the heavy duty spring, and not use the elastomer. But I'm going to put them all together. I'm going to put it as very hard because that's the way I ran it when I was testing it. That's the way it felt best to me and allowed me to control the car like I thought I should be able to. I'm going to put all this back together. I'm going to put the right up. Really easy to do this, obviously. It's not rocket science here. I'm going to push this up. The only thing is, you see how this, when it sits there, it's flush with the bumper basically flush, and this is going to fit down on top of it. So it's not quite fitting down on top of it. You have to kind of squeeze it a little bit as you're pushing it in. So you got to kind of balance it, then put my finger on the top of it to keep it from going anywhere, hopefully, and slide that baby in there like that. Okay, now I'm catching the bottom with my bottom of my hand here, and you don't need a tool to get it back in. I just kind of get centered on this, get a thumb under each side of our bar, push it up, and it clips down into the first piece. It's not all the way down yet, though, so don't get fooled by that. I'm going to show you that, a close-up of that. You know, it's still sitting proud there. You don't want it to do that. You want it to go ahead and get all the way in. So that's what we're going to do. There it goes. And now it's seating down in it, and that's what you want. All right, so we've set our pedal to the hardest, or very hard, what they call, setting. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this back together, and then we'll have a chance to go over, see how it's mounted, and run it. And then we'll give our thoughts in the driving segment about how this stuff feels. So yeah, not much else to see here, so we'll just go ahead and get on to the next segment. Now for our look inside segment on the pedal set itself. As you can see, I already have this open, and it was a simple matter, although it did take a little bit of time, of just taking the screwdriver, powered one, and taking out all the screws that are in the holes here. And again, there's 19, no less than 19 of these screws to actually get out of the casement. And eventually, once we get all the screws out, then the top case just kind of falls away from the bottom pedal case. And we're using, or they're using, these little screws here. And these are the coarse grade or coarse set on the threads there, so it bites into the plastic. So we have plastic on all of this here, no metal inserts for these screws. And there's 19 of those. So when you're finished taking them all out, you want to count them, make sure you have them all. Some of them don't want to come out once you get them loose. So this is what the top looks like inside. There is a steel bar here that keeps the front weighted down, so it feels more balanced when you pick it up and you're moving it, because you have all the pedals on the back part and electronics and the things like that. Again, this is the usual type of injection molded plastic we see in these pedal sets. Let's turn this around. We can see the cabling here, how they're doing this. We have a reinforcement bar here for the mounting. So that's metal, which is good. We also have each one of these boards with the sensor on it. And you can see they're all cabled in here. And it looks like they're just using cellophane tape here to hold this down. So that's their cable management solution here. And of course, we got the main cable coming back out here, comes out the back, and goes through a little bit of cable management itself. It exits the side of our casement. So I'm going to try to show you guys what one of these boards looks like. I'm going to use the throttle because that's the one with the lightest spring on it, because you have to take the spring out of the bottom here. There's a little ball shape on the back of this pedal lever or arm. See a little ball hanging down in there? It captures the top of that spring. You can also see there's lots of grease on this, which is good. We don't want it making noise, do we? So I got a paper towel here that I'm going to grab this with. See if I can get this out without too much drama. I'm just going to push down on the spring. Hopefully I can clear it that easily. And it looks like that's happening. Okay. Get that back down. There's our spring. Put that over here. Get rid of my paper towel. Now the pedal lever itself, there is like a pin in here that's removable. See how removable that is in a minute. I'm just going to take one of my tools here. See if I can just push this out and get that off of there. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see, I'll turn this around so you guys can see better what's going on here. Here we go. I'll just pick this up, try to take some pressure off of it and push it through. Looks like it's coming through with no drama. How about that? Go ahead and take it out. And it just has enough space between the brake pedal over here where that mount is to get it out. I'm hoping this will just come straight up. There we go. Okay. So there's our steel pin that it rotates on. And there's our lever. And in the lever, there's our magnets. Now, if you'll notice, show you this here. There's two magnets in here. There's one here and there's one here. We've got a dual magnet, or two magnetic fields acting on the sensor itself instead of just one. Interesting. I've seen this in another pedal set too. They're starting to do that. I guess it must give a more accurate signal than just having a magnet on just one piece and it increases and decreases. Here, it's going to be on both sides of this. And I'm going to take this off. I wasn't sure if I was going to do that, but I'm going to give it a go here. And see if I can get this out without breaking anything. I'm pretty sure I can. It looks pretty simple here. So 2 screws, and they're just little Phillips screws holding this board in here. Like this. Again, they're the plastic screws. You can see the aggressive thread on there, if you can focus on it. And then we'll pull the board up. And it's connected to a plug here. So I'm just going to gently see if I can wiggle that out of there. Doesn't come too easily. I might leave it alone. Yeah, I can get it out. There we go. Plug is loose. So here's what we have. Pretty simple looking little board here. A little plug connector, and you can see there's some traces in there in the board itself. And there's our sensor. So the sensor, we can see here, has 2 sides to it. Yeah, it's kind of shaped like a wedge, sort of, but leaning one way more than the other. And it looks like to me that the sensor's right in the middle there. I don't know how well this is going to show up on the video. But the sensor looks like it's sitting down inside of this housing. Tilt it this way, you might be able to see the top of it. There we go. You see the difference there where that's kind of sitting in this housing. So we've got a magnet on this side and this side. And as we move the lever, where's my lever? see, it's going this way, and this was going this way. Okay, so this way you guys can see this, right? So the lever, when it moves, is moving this way and this way. Not hitting it, obviously, but that's the way it's doing it. So we've got a decreasing magnetic field on one side and increasing on the other, and then the other way we have it in reverse. So that's the way that's working. Actually pretty cool. I like this. And you can see how if you do get dust on this, or dirt from your, or lint from your sock, if you're a sock driver, then yeah, it's easy enough to just blow these things off. There's no internal workings like the wipers inside of a potentiometer housing to get all gummed up with everything. So you just blow that off and off you go. Yeah. And what does it say on it? I don't know if I can read this or not. It just says Thrustmaster on it. On the back here. Give you guys a look at that. Read that part that way. And there it is on the Thrustmaster. All right. Pretty clean little board. Yeah. And it looks like, I'm looking at the rest of them. The rest of these boards are, as you might imagine, identical. All set up the same way, which makes sense because, you know, we don't have any load cells in here, and this is just doing the positional sensing for the pedal. Well, anything else I can show you while we're doing the look inside on the pedals? I think that's it. I did take all the faces off, the steel faces. Again, I like these. These are heavy duty units here. And I might shift the wedges when I put it back together. I'm not sure yet. Piece of paper towel over there. So now all I have to do is put everything back together, put my 19 screws back in, and then I'll plug it in and make sure I didn't break anything and it still works. Now for our look inside segment. Now I thought I would demonstrate how this casing comes off the back of the wheelbase so we can see all the mechanicals of what's going on in here. I may be removing the steering wheel so we can see what the circuit board looks like in there, but it's going to be a lot more involved to get the steering wheel off because there's a lot of, see all these screws around the inside of this rim? And this around so you can see it. We've got screws all the way around there. And we have some down in here behind the wheel around the hub area. Got another like 6 of them down there, or 8 or so. Still debating that one, but I might do it anyway. So first thing you want to do when you do this kind of stuff is have the right attitude when you go in here. You don't want to hurry things. You want to take your time. And the main law here is do no harm. Take your time. And your cell phone is your friend. So if you see something complicated before you start taking it apart, take some pictures with your cell phone. Let you have a reference when you go back and you want to put it back together. Right. Also, it helps to have a tool like this with a long screwdriver bit on it because some of these screws are recessed pretty far in here and might be difficult to remove. So let's go ahead and get started. There's 4 screws on the front we're going to get off first. All right, so we've got a screw here, we got one over here, and we have one on the side here. You guys can see that one. And then we have these fake ones on the bottom. There's nothing in the bottom. Let's see if I can turn it this way and show you. There's just indentations in there. There may be some screws on the other side here holding something else on. But right now, that's all. So 4 to get started on the front. And we'll go ahead and get those off. All right, so we've got those 4 out. And these are the screws that we're going to be running into during the whole disassembly process. It has the coarse thread that they use in all the plastic connections, and it's a Phillips head. And you notice I have a little magnetic dish here. Very important. There's going to be a lot of screws we're dealing with here. You want to make sure that none of them get away from you, and you have to go looking for them. So yeah, that's not a good thing. Again, we want to make sure that we have all our screws when we try to put this thing back together. 2 things you don't want to do is have an extra screw and not have enough screws when you finish your reassembly process. Now we have a screw here, and we have one on the other side here. Now, I should have shown you this before. This cover, sometimes you can tell what a cover, how it's assembled just by following the seams. So I know this piece here is one piece where these vent holes are, and I can see there's a seam over here too. Well, that's going to show up. There's a seam right in here. And if you follow the seam around that corner here, it goes back here. Then it comes up and loops around, Goes back around the other way. So I know this is one piece here. And these two side screws have got to come out before that will come off, at least. Maybe some more. So we'll go ahead and get those out. Now, these are different. These are not Phillips head. I believe these are 2 mil as far as the wrench size goes. And I'm right. There we go. And I'm just going to unscrew these by hand. And these are different screws. They have a point to them. See that? You want to make note of this mentally, or take a picture with your cell phone, whatever you need to do, so you know where this screw came off or came out of. That way when you go back in, you'll know that these need to go back into the sides, and you're not trying to put one up in the front or somewhere else. All right. And I'll tend to, in the magnetic dish, if you have a decent one, you can usually group your screws together. Just keep squeezing them together like that. And I'll put that one off to the side so it lets me see groups of screws on the way back in when I'm reassembling it, so it makes it a little easier. Now, all right. So there's more screws. See, I found some more here, and that's what you have to do. You just have to look around and find out what's going on as you go along. So it looks like I have some screws in here. Yep, deep down in there I have some. So these screws, see how these holes are going in this way? Got 2 here. Got 2 deep ones over here, and I can see that chances are, because of where they're at, they may be holding the back end of this piece right here. I'm going to take those out. Then maybe we can get that section off. All right, so we got those 4 out. Now, let's see what we've got here. So this thing's getting loose. Looks like it is. Now, this is where I'll come in. Instead of using your fingernails, which you could do, I usually get my little kit out. Now, this is just a cheapy cell phone kit, opening kit. So you work on a cell phone, you can pull the screens off and stuff with these little tools they have in them. They're only like $8 or so. I highly recommend that you have this in your toolkit or something like it, because these are non-marring plastic pieces here. So you can pry on things and investigate stuff without damaging anything while you were opening it up. So it looks like this is coming right off. So there we go. I'm looking for wires too. When I pull this thing off, I want to make sure nothing is connected to it. And it looks like we're clear here. There's nothing on this. Again, just the cheapy flexi injection molded plastic. Now we have some other screws in here. While we're looking at it, you see we have a screw here. We have one over here, here, and here. They're holding these pieces in. These little rib pieces. Looks like, I'm thinking the function of these things is just for the screw holders. So the screws that we took out on the back there, or the front rather, on the 4 screws, that's what this is. They actually screwed this piece in so that we can screw the other screws in to hold it to the front. I always like to look at things like that when I take things apart so I can get a better idea of what's going on in the construction. Put that aside. Now we still have this piece here, this bottom piece. And I know it's a separate piece from the front because, again, I can just follow the seam around and see that where it goes. It goes all the way around to the other side over here. So this piece can come off too. Now, the first thing I noticed was we have these 3 big pieces back here, or screws rather, not pieces, and they're Phillips screws. But we also have, if I turn around and look at the front part, 4 Phillips screws going in here, 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 here. And those are the only ones I can see right now. So we'll deal with those guys. Again, I'm careful when I'm moving this around. I don't want to get my tools in here and rip off wires or anything like that. Just paying attention, basically. The best that I can. So I'm just kind of tilt this over a little bit, hold it at the same time, and pull these screws out. Now I have those 4 screws out. I can tell that this is not going to come off. And I can look down in here too. If you look down in here, we can see that we have some pieces, these little protrusions from the center steering shaft housing that are sticking up. We got one here. I got one over here in the back. And I can see they're corresponding with these screws on the top. So easy enough to tell that's got to come off. These 3 screws are coming off. I'm going to use a bigger screwdriver for this and just do it by hand because it shouldn't take very long. Now that we have those off, think I don't see anything else. Let's kind of wiggle it around here. And I'm also mindful, remember we've got these connectors in here, this connector plate assembly. More than likely that's not attached to here. And that's true, because as I'm pulling off, I can see it staying in there. I'm also watching for any wires as I'm pulling this off, and there are no wires. And that's what the inside looks like. We have some metal reinforcements. These are for our M6 bolts. So when we're attaching it to something, obviously we want a metal reinforcement in there. And of course, that's the M6 machine threaded insert in there. Anything else? We got a little piece here that's holding our Velcro cable management piece in the back. This is actually a little stiffer, I think, than the top part. And you can see in some places here, there's some reinforcing ribs. Right in here. In here. So that gives it some reinforcement because they kind of bend into an L here. This actually feels pretty solid. Okay, now we've got it open. And we can take a look at what's going on here. Now, Thrustmaster calls this their hybrid drive, which means it's really a combination of gears and belts. We have the main motherboard, I'm going to call this, electronics board over here. And this is where our power is coming in. This is where the USB is, USB-C. And of course, this is for the shifter, and then we have the pedal connection over here. Pretty clean looking board. The normal thing I would expect to find in this kind of wheel. Mass-produced Thrustmaster type wheel. Yeah, no surprises here. We have obviously the power's coming in here. So we're going to see some supporting capacitors. We have an inductor down here. And we also have some smoothing capacitors up here with some very large shunt resistors in here on the board. Which again, this is something that I expected to see. It looks like we have our main processor chip over here in the middle. A little glare there because of the lights. But I'm trying to tilt it so it doesn't glare so much. Very clean. And we can take this board off. There's a screw here, here, one up here. Looks like that's it. Just 3 of them. But we're going to have to pull 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plugs off of it if we wanted to do that. So I wouldn't do that unless I was going to have to get further into the assembly, which I'm not going to do. We can see down here, I don't know if you can see down inside of there, but we have another one of these. See these screws here? These are the main screws that are holding this assembly, the whole motor assembly, to the front plate here. So you can see they have the warranty paint on them, red. And we have them all around here. We have them down inside of here. And we have them down inside of here. So they're all around here. And you have to remove this board to get to one also. And probably one behind the board that I can't see. So I'm not going to do that. There's really no need to do that to show you guys what's going on here. The other circuit board we have down here, the smaller one, this is the position sensor board. And you can see this little rounded piece that's molded into this injection molded plastic piece. And it's notched out for the board to fit there. There is a gear behind here. And that gear is driven by a belt. And I am going to try to get you a peek in there if it's possible. Out of the way so I can get closer. I don't know how well you're going to see this, but there we go. There you go. I think you can see that some of the teeth of the gear down here. And that's down in here. There's a pinion gear. Spot her down here. Maybe we can see it. Oh, maybe it's showing up. There's a little gear down there, a pinion gear. And that's driving the main gear over here. You can see the main gear easily enough. Here's our main gear. That's the motor shaft or the steering shaft gear. That little pinion you see down the bottom here, hopefully you can see that. It's not easy, but I'll try to give you guys some different angles where you can see it. There's a little pinion gear that drives that one. Now that pinion gear is being driven by a belt. There's a black belt in here, and you can see the numbering on the belt right there. See that little bit of numbering we're seeing? That's actually the belt. And that belt is going up, all the way up to another pinion gear on the motor, which again is not going to be easy to see. Try to tilt it in here and see if you guys can see vaguely what's going on there. There's a pinion gear on the end of the motor, obviously, and that's where the belt is connected. So we have a belt drive down to this gear, and then that is actually meshing with its pinion gear into the main gear. So that's why they call it a hybrid drive. We have belt and then we have gears. And that allows, if it was all belt driven, not as much of the torque can come through. The force feedback details get dampened by just belt systems. So here we have a belt system turning a gear against a gear, which allows them to have more detail in the force feedback. So that's why they do this. It's a good idea, actually. And when I was driving it, I could feel the difference between an all belt driven Thrustmaster wheel and this wheel, even though it's a little underpowered, especially for what I'm used to. But it's, again, this is an entry level wheel, so it's not going to have that much power. We have a cooling fan. I wasn't sure about this, but there it is, because I never could hear it. There's the cooling fan. It's on top. So that means that that cooling fan is pulling air down. Actually, it's blowing it up. See how the label on this is sticking out here? So it's blowing it this way. So it's blowing the air out of the top and sucking it in. Where's the bottom? Sucking it in through that bottom piece here, those perforations. That's how the air is going to flow. The motor itself, you can see it's kind of a cute little guy in there. Awful small, but they claim that there's 70% more power in this motor, or this assembly is delivering 70% more power than the T150. Now again, they don't say 70% more torque, they just say power. We have the main shaft here that's turning the steering wheel in this housing, this plastic housing here. We have a main cable. You can see how this big cable here, and it's going down in the hollow of that steering wheel shaft, and it's coiled. Better see the coils from here. You know, it's coiled up like a phone cable or USB something. And that is because when they pull this wheel off, it gives them slack, because the wiring, remember, we got wires going to this wheel, have to, because it's powering the display and the buttons when we press a button, that kind of thing. So anything else that sticks out here? Not really. It's a pretty compact system, which is kind of nice. If something goes wrong, there's only a few places for it to go wrong. Typically what we'll find a failure on a direct drive wheel, or not a direct drive wheel, but a force feedback wheel, is in these boards here, in the older wheels, like the Logitech G27s. I know there was a lot of problems there as they got older. So yeah, but this is all electronic. It's got a electronic sensing. It's probably using some kind of a magnet for the sensing there. And remember, every time you start your wheel, when it spins around from one stop to the next stop, that's calibrating wheel position all over again. So it calibrates every time that it comes up. So this little chip here is reading all that information. And of course, it's sending that over to the main board here and being processed over here. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can show you guys of interest here. So I hope this segment gave you guys a good idea on the basic functionality of how this hybrid system is working on this Thrustmaster wheel. Here is the wheelbase mounted to our ASR1's wheel deck. We were able to get the two M6 bolts attached underneath. The pattern fit, no problems. And a very stiff support, especially considering what we're running here. This T248 has some thin metal substructure in here supporting everything. So we're probably going to see some flex down here in the base, or by the time we get out to the steering wheel, we're probably going to see some flex out here when I'm using it, but we'll see. The cabling, pretty basic stuff here. Nothing to get too excited about. It's coming out the back of the wheel as it should. USB pedals and power. And I have some zip ties in here just to do some basic testing type of cabling routing. And it comes down here and joins our big cables that's supporting our motion system down here. We have attached to this ASR1 rig. That's the DK2 free actuator motion system. The pedals are securely mounted to this 1/4 inch thick plate, which is very secure for this type of pedal, especially because they're lightweight stuff. Yeah, get under here. You can see I have a bolt, 3 bolts in the front down here, and I have 2 in the back holes. It's a bit dark under here, but I think you can see it okay. But we have a total of 5 M6 bolts attaching everything, which should be enough. I am running the black spring with the spacer here, so that's as hard as I can make it as far as the stiffness goes. I've already got everything up and running. I did have an issue when I first plugged in the wheel. Yeah, I didn't see it in, well, I actually saw it, but it was really messed up as far as the latency involved trying to bring up the game settings for it. So that was cured once I ran the T248 firmware package, and it updated the firmware, and then I rebooted the computer. Now everything's working fine, as it should. So no issues there. Pretty easy, really, once we get all the drivers mounted. But that goes with anything that we mount to our game consoles or our computers. So I'm happy the way that went. And now the only thing left to do is to get in and do some driving and see what we think about this wheel. Now we're going to take a brief look at the driver. That is what we see when we have the T248 up and running. And you see it here. Also, I'm going to show you some of the display stuff. Go ahead and exit out of that. Okay, so usual thing we'll see in the game settings or game configuration in Windows. We can see the wheel turns, and we can set up different things for our rotation angle, things like that. But we can also do it on the wheel, and I'll get to that in a second. Here we'll see, obviously, the throttle and the brake and the clutch are working. The buttons, good place to test out your buttons to make sure everything's working. Two of these buttons don't work, display and mode. I think mode works. No, either one of these work. Okay. Because they do things to the wheel. But all the rest of the buttons do work. And we have this little encoder system here. It's pretty cool. Just might as well go over that while we're looking at the game driver, if you will, here, the control panel. And this is an encoder button over here on the left-hand side. It has arrows on it. And if I push it up, you can see it says E2, E3, E4, and back to E1. It just cycles through. Or you can reverse if you want. Well, once you're in there. No, you can't. You have to go all the way through. So you can't go backwards. So if I'm in E1, if you look at the controls up here, if I push the arrow down, P lights up for E1. And you'll see E1 right there. The P lights up. And we also have a negative and plus, which means the switch on the right hand with the plus and the negative will light up. When we do plus, it's 14, minus it's 15. So we can assign 3 buttons or map 3 buttons when we're in encoder 1. I go to encoder 2, and that's going to change down here, or rather over here, to encoder 2. And now when I push down, I'll get 12. And if I do the plus, I'll get 17 and minus 16. So that gives me 3 more mappable positions in my wheel. So a total of 4 of these, and again, you have to cycle through them. A total of 4 of these mean we can assign another 12 buttons moves, and that's how they come up with a way to use the encoders. It's actually not too bad of an interface. The only thing is you're going to have to remember what you assign to encoder 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, which may or may not be intuitive. You could make a little piece of paper or something to make sure you didn't forget, or put a notepad up if you have another monitor so you can see what it is. But at least it gives us that extra 12 button presses of functionality in the existing wheel. And of course, we can look at where the shifters are, 1 and 2. And again, these are loud shifters, very tactile shifters. I like them. I know there's probably going to be some people going, wow, that is way too loud. I cannot use those shifters. And they're probably right if they're sitting next to one or somebody's in the next room trying to study or something. That could be annoying. But you see on the display, I get a minus for this side, which it should be downshift, and a plus for upshift over here. So overall, I like the interface here. And of course, the rest of the buttons work. We have the hat over here, and that goes all the way around. So we can actually, each one of these, there's only 4 of them here. But as I lean one way or the other on one, oh no, yeah. If I go to this one, yeah, you can rock over each side of this, and you can actually walk it all the way around. Interesting. Right. So all the other buttons work, is my point. And even the PlayStation button in PC mode, and that's what I'm in, works on number 13. So that's good. We have a good range of functionality here. Now, we also have a mode button, and you can press the mode button and see some different things without even being in the game on this wheel. And I'm going to press mode, and then it'll pop up, and then you can start scrolling through a few things. Temp, it tells me what I'm assuming the wheel temp is, 28 degrees centigrade. My pedal configuration, which is currently on the floor. The rotation, I can change this up here. I don't have to change it in the driver, so you can actually do it on the fly. 270, 360, and 540, 720, and default 900. I usually leave mine at 900 unless there's a reason I need to change it. So that works fine. We have pedal again. It's not a whole lot going on here. PC, or you can see I have it set to PC. And if I press the mode button again, it'll exit and get out of this. Just wait for it, and boom, it saved PC or any settings I put in there and the mode button. Now there's also, I'm going to go back in. I can find it here. There it is. Force feedback. All right. So we've got 3 different force feedback profiles. Number 1, and we can actually go back and forth on these. Number 1 is a linear curve or a straight line on a graph. And I'll show you a picture of it there. That's the solid line. And then we have, go back over here to force feedback 2. It is less of a linear curve, so it actually puts more force than the game is sending you. And 3 is the same thing as 2, but just more of it. So even more force if you want to get more force out of it. It's not the same, and don't confuse it with what we set up here on the driver, where we can go over here to the gain settings and go in here and set this to 100%, 60%, what have you. Because you can see all of mine are set up to 100% because I want to try to get the most out of this wheel that I can. Also, of course, we can see what our firmware is up here, and you can also do that here. Go up here, about, base, and it will give you the firmware that it is currently running, 1.72, which is correct up here. It doesn't tell us what the driver is, but it does. No DI. Oh, here we go, 3PA floor. So that's what it sees the pedals as, apparently. Huh, interesting. All right, so pretty good functionality, I think, for this wheel. And what we're going to do is see how it's compatible with, I'm going to use iRacing. And once we get an iRacing, we can actually push this display button down here. It will give us a way to change around what we want to see on the display. Now, as you can see here, get out of this. If I press the display button now, nothing happens. You have to be in game to do it. So that's what we'll look at next. We'll go ahead and get in iRacing and take a look at what we have as far as what we can change while we're in the car, as far as RPM selections, things like that. So we're in iRacing. I'm going to go ahead and get in the car here and show you some of the different things we can do with this display. First, obviously, we are in gear mode right now, and I can change gears by going up and down. All right. Now, we can turn the display on to change things around. So I'm going to go to display, and I can now change it from gear to time, personal best time. That was personal best lap. You can go to current lap. You can go to last lap. And we can also go to lap position, 0 of 95. And position 1 for this session, I guess. Rev lights, that's the bar. It goes across the bottom here. We can have digits like this if I select revs or RPMs. If I do that, we should have a bar going on the bottom. I don't know if we can have the bar both. In fact, let's go ahead and just get in and drive this thing and see what we have here when we're doing that. Yeah, because I'm still in the display mode, the bar's not changing, but my RPMs is changing on the display itself. And while I'm in here running with the display mode on, I can change things around and decide which rev lights I want. Now, if you look at the rev lights, I can change these arrows on here. Let's go ahead and stop some, turn the wheel around. I can go into rev mode. I can change these arrows. Now, the arrows mean which way the RPM bar is going to flow. No RPM bar is flat, then the arrows are left to right, right to left, from outside in, inside out, and that's about it. I'm going to go outside in, see how that works. And again, I'm in RPM mode. I can change that to speed if I want. Once we get going, you can see the speedometer's working. But again, I'm not having any RPM readings until I get out. I hit this display mode again and get out. Now my RPMs are up, and you'll see them coming in from both sides to the middle. And I'm looking at my speed. So yeah, that's working fine, just like it should. And the speed is matching what I have on my display over here. I was checking that. So it's picking up the telemetry. I'm in miles per hour. So that's what it's showing me, miles per hour here, because they're matching. While I'm not in display mode. Let's see if I can change things around here. Nope. So you can see my cockpit is moving when I'm using the buttons now, because now they're back to the function that I mapped them for. So once we're in display mode, that doesn't work. We're actually adjusting things. So you have to go back into display mode if you want to change this back to gear shift or something. And then I'm back out of display mode and all my buttons are working normally. So there we have it. Actually, it's not bad, the functionality here. Out of the box, Thrustmaster has a working display that, you know, other manufacturers, I've gotten things out of their box and their display was a nice fancy display, but it only had very limited functionality. And even today, I think it's not fully functional. But anyway, it's good that they took their time and got this right before they brought it to market. So yeah, hats off to Thrustmaster for having a wheel that actually works. Everything works, and especially the display works. On iRacing, at least, I haven't tested it on anything else. But yeah, I like it. We're in iRacing at the ring in the Ferrari 488 GT3. We'll talk about the force feedback first, its quality of it. Now remember, this is a hybrid type of system here where we have a belt drive and then we have the gear drive. They're trying to get the best of both worlds without getting the bad parts of both worlds. So we get more detail in a system like this, right? We're going to get more detail than like in a belt-driven wheel, but we're not going to get the same amount of cogging or the notchiness you feel in the gear mesh, and the gears meshing with other gears, that we do in a dedicated gear wheel. There's more fine detail available, but the cogging is still there. I mean, it's hard to get away from that. I mean, we got gear on gear. It's going to be there if you feel for it, but it's certainly not as prominent as a regular gear-driven wheel. And the belt drive helps dampen that, obviously. But the belt drive also takes some of the detail out. I think they've come up with a pretty decent balance here for those who like detail in their driving. And I like detail. I'm one of those guys that, you know, the more detail, the better. But unfortunately, usually when you crank up the detail, that means you're cranking up bad artifacts at the same time, and you want to dampen them back down so you don't get all this notchiness around the center. And it's like I say, it's a game of chasing things around depending on who you are and what you like best. But I think the force feedback, this wheel is definitely able to get you to a point where you can control the car confidently, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Can I get on this wheel and get my muscle memory and everything going well enough to where I can do consistent laps? And I think you can do that with this wheel, but then manage your expectations correctly. It is an entry-level wheel, and it's not going to have the precision of things that cost more. And you obviously, most people would think logically about that and go, yeah, that's true. So the extra power here is noticeable too, by the way. 70%, I'm not sure about 70%, but you know, we'll just go ahead and go with that. That's what Thrustmaster said. Certainly has more power than the T150 model that they have. So again, force feedback is good enough to get you to handle or control the car consistently, and that's all that matters in the day. The shifters on this wheel is something I want to talk about too, the good and the bad. The good is they are very tactile feeling. They have a nice crisp click to them. This is kind of shifter that I like to use. In fact, when I first got it out of the box and I went and tried the shifters, I said, wait a minute. I had to go back to my Logitech wheels and my Thrustmaster and the Fanatec CSL stuff with their normal shifter on them. And yeah, they were like spongy compared to this. This thing has got a nice crisp click to it. And I like that. And I think most people would like using it. But the problem with that is, with more tactile feedback, usually comes more noise, and that's certainly the case here. They're loud. And if you live in a house or apartment, or you're driving in your closet, and there's people in close proximity to you, they're not going to tolerate this very much if they're trying to concentrate and do something else. It's just too much of a loud click going on. Man, but they sure do feel good. It's something you really need to pay attention to and consider as far as your racing space goes, on whether you can have something like this and not bother other people or bother yourself. But yeah, definitely a great feel in these shifters. Let's talk about the pedals. Again here, manage our expectations. It's all position sensed type of pedals, not pressure based. But the good news is we don't have those cheap potentiometers in here. We've got some Hall sensor effect type setups for the position sensing, and that's always better than having a potentiometer. Easy maintenance, so they don't get dirty like the potentiometers can attract dust and get down in their little wiper blades internally, and then anybody's ever had to take one of those apart and clean them know what I'm talking about. So here we have a better system, and I'm glad that they implemented that in this which makes it a more desirable kit because of that, versus one that has pots in it. The throttle I was able to modulate well enough, not really precisely as I can with other pedal sets, but again, no surprise here. But I was able to get enough muscle memory going after a while that I was pretty confident on what I was doing in the corners. So really no trouble there. The brake, again, is not a pressure-based one, and it's a positional brake. And coming from using pressure-based brake pedals to a positional one in this kind of entry-level market is a big difference. And it did take me a little time to adjust to that, to get that muscle memory back to where I used to a long time ago drive with pedals like this. So I was able to get it to where I could feel like I was controlling the car, and that's an important thing, obviously. But the transition from your threshold to your trail braking was very numb. I just couldn't feel it at all. So then it became muscle memory. So, and of course we can do that too, but it's not as a good feel as with a load cell type pedal. So something else you might want to consider, but something that is entirely meeting expectations for something like this kit is. Overall, I think they've got a pretty good kit here. It's more powerful than T150. It gives you enough detail without too much cogginess to have a good time driving your car. Pedals are good enough to, with muscle memory practice, to get to where you can confidently control the car. Although, you know, as far as little fine movements for trail braking might be lost on you a little faint. But other than that, you know, Thrustmaster's done what they always do. They came out with a competent wheel set here with some improvements and some cool things in it. But just remember, those shifters are loud. Final thoughts on the Thrustmaster T248 force feedback wheel kit. Out of the box, this wheelbase feels very light. At almost 5 pounds, I was expecting something with a bit more mass to it, especially with Thrustmaster claiming a power increase of 70% over the T150 kit. This entire kit is made from injection molded plastics, as are most at this price point. The steering wheel grip has plastic on the inside with a fake leather wrap on the top. The leather feels good, but accentuates the different feel between the materials when gripped. The steering wheel has a surprisingly functional LCD screen, where you can adjust force feedback parameters, display options, and more, without having to go into the driver menu on your PC. It worked without any dramas out of the box once the proper drivers were loaded. Another surprise here is the paddle shifters on the wheel. They have a nice tactile feel when actioned. The plastic levers do take something away from this feel, but not enough to keep from enjoying using them. But with tactile feedback usually comes increased noise levels of the shifts. These shifters are loud, and this may cause issues for those who live in close quarters with others. Only you will know if your racing space can tolerate the increased noise. The included pedal set is the T3PM model, with a Hall sensor-like setup for position sensing instead of some cheap potentiometers. This should give longer life cycles and be easier to keep clean than the pots found on other pedal sets. The brake pedal has 4 different levels of resistance adjustments. It is easy to make changes to the stack, and even easier if you use some kind of lever tool to assist in removing it. I use the hardest resistance setting, which is the white elastomer with the black spring. In use, I found the pedals to achieve the kind of performance that most pedal sets at this price point deliver. I was able to get adjusted to the position-based brake pedal and get some consistent lap times. Still, being a position-based pedal, it will never be as consistent feeling as a pressure-based pedal. The T248 wheelbase did feel like it was delivering more power than the T150, which is a welcome change for me. The belt-to-gear drive system brings a different feel that a system based solely on belt or gear drive can't. More fine detail than a belt drive, but without as much cogging that is present in the gear drive setups. You can still feel the gears meshing, just not as much. When turning laps with this wheel, I was able to get it to where I could be consistent. But even with the increased power levels of the T248, I was left wanting for more. Of course, this is an entry-level wheel and pedal kit, so there's only so much you can do at these price points. Overall, if you're looking for an entry-level force feedback wheel kit that you can use on a PC or PlayStation, I think most will be happy with the T248. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website, at simracinggarage.com.